Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Burke County Board of Commissioners pre-agenda meeting for April the 6th, 2021 at 3 p.m. All commissioners are present, along with the county manager, clerk, attorney, and our financial officer, assistant manager. I have others in the room, staff present as well. Let me remind you this afternoon, if you have mobile devices, to please take care of those at this time. If they may make some noise, if you will check on those. Remind you to activate the microphone at the podium as you come forward. And we've got some disinfectant there. If you like to use it while you're there, that'll be fine. It is a self-cleaning day, so please take care of that yourself, coming or going at the podium. And we've had a couple, or have a couple birthdays in the month of April among the board, and I'd like to wish a little bit belated happy birthday to Commissioner Abley, who celebrated birthday on April 1st, and then tomorrow, Commissioner Taylor has a birthday on April 7th, so happy birthday, gentlemen.
Thank you.
All right, at this time, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you, Maynard. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. I believe that's all of us, Madam Clerk. We have one presentation today. This presentation comes from Charter Communications, update on the FCC Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, and that's going to be presented today by our county manager. Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I've been in contact with Michael Tank with Spectrum a while back, and he told me that something was coming, but he was not allowed to talk about it. This was back in late November. Apparently, the FCC had some sort of an auction, reversed auction about expanding broadband, and I have asked him to come up and do a presentation to this board as to how that will be accomplished, and to help our citizens hear what kind of plans there are, or what the process is for that expansion in Burke County as well as other rural counties. And I just thought that would be good to get that out and let this board have an opportunity to ask questions of Mr. Tank and communicate your desire to see them move this along in Burke County as quick as possible.
All right, thank you, Brian. Gentlemen, any questions for Brian on this matter?
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if Brian can answer. I was going to ask, excuse me. I was going to ask this one question. Is there a limit that we do not control the tower height? What is the tallest tower you can put in Burke County without? Do we know?
I don't personally. I think we got up to about 150 feet with our current tower at 911, and if you go above that, then there's more regulations because it's higher, and that could be an issue for aircraft, but I don't know. I'm sorry.
Well, I used to know those figures, and I just don't know them anymore. But the reason I was asking is for the next item on the agenda to see if that could help with infrastructure and being able to get signals out. And it probably would have to be in the neighborhood of 8 to 1,000 feet above average terrain to do what you need to do with that. So,
Yeah, in an earlier meeting with Mr. Tank, they are not looking at wireless as a solution. I think they're still looking at hard line, either above ground or underground. And more above ground, I think it's easier for them to do. But he'll go into that.
I fully understood that, but if you had a high tower, you can rent the space, so, and make a lot of money. Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions? All right, hearing none, this item will remain on the agenda as a presentation. All right, this brings us to item 4, scheduled public hearings. We have several public hearings to consider this month. First one being consideration of exceptions to performance requirements in the DIG agreement with Morganton Lodging Associates LP. In public hearing, this will be presented by our county manager. Again, Mr. Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the board, you may remember it's been a little while back, we did a dig agreement for a hotel coming into downtown here in Morganton. And there were, as I understand it, and the county attorney can correct me if I'm wrong, there were a couple of things in that that said you shall. And my understanding of you shall is you have no latitude. You have to do this as a minimum. And part of that was the date for the completion of the building. And then there was another one regarding staff members' employment. And I'm just giving you the short, and the companies will have representatives here on the night of the 20th to go over this, but you know, we've built several things, and sometimes there are issues with subcontractors. There can be issues with getting materials, and then you had COVID. And when the government shuts you down, it's hard to justify financially having full-time employees when you got no revenue coming in. And that happened about the time they were opening. Again, this is taxpayers' money. We have a public hearing to enable the transparency of people seeing what we're doing with their money. And I felt like we needed to have this come back before you for you to hear what happened and why it happened, and consider making an exception and allowing the grant to go forward. And again, this. And to be transparent, again, this is taxpayers' money. I'd rather err to this side than somebody say, well, we should have known that. That's what you made your decision off of, and since it changed, would you have made the same decision? So again, it's just an opportunity to hear what really happened and why, and try to move forward with this. And I appreciate your patience on this.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Gentlemen, any question on this item? You've had the information in your package outlining the items Brian has talked about. Any question on this item?
Mr. Chairman, I only had one on this one too, and I apologize. My comment was for the next item on the agenda, not the question that I asked. But what happens if they do not attain 18 full-time employees this year and maybe next year? Do we come back each year and do as such as we're doing today and alter or accept it as it is? Or do we have some kind of fine because they're not reaching the 18 full-time employees?
I don't know what to tell you. I think there's a multitude of ways to go, and we can ask the county attorney to help us think through some of those. If you wanted to give the county manager latitude, if there was a problem and he felt that he understood why they couldn't do whatever the number of employees are, you could go at it that way. I don't know about if there was a reduction in the incentive if those numbers aren't met. That would be something that we need the county attorney to help us through, but we've got a little bit of time before the 20th. We can come up with some alternatives if we need to.
But unless things turn around real fast, I personally foresee that he's not going to get to 18 this year either. So, and that's the reason I asked the question.
JR, any comment on that? Does this exception, if we grant this exception, does that exception go forward, or what's your thoughts?
Well, the county has the right to either hold them to it or to say, we understand what went on. The company is submitting the NCUI 101 forms, so that gives us a basis for understanding their full-time employees. And that's then up to you five guys to decide how you want to go forward with it.
All right. Gentlemen, any concern, question, thoughts on this process?
Just another thought about employees, and I know David's in the back. I know there's been challenges up there just because obviously the COVID, but you can also go going forward. It's going to still be challenging because we keep getting legislation passed and people are getting checks, and they're having. I know, if I'm not mistaken, they're having difficulty, and maybe they still are getting folks to show up. Is that still true?
for every business right now, it's very difficult
Yeah.
to employ to do all, and that's not simply hospitality, but also, well, you're right.
Is that okay, Jeff? Sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
That is correct. I mean, I think we all know employment right now is a challenge across business, whether it be, I mean, the furniture business as well. We're having difficulties there as well. That is always a challenge. We are mitigating that and working through that as best we can. And we are fortunately, I believe, seeing more people coming to the area now, which is great to see. So as things are opening back up, people are turning to Burke County, coming here to actually visit. So that's good. Thank you.
Any other thoughts on this, so far as going forward, so we don't have to revisit this?
And Mr. Chairman, I think, just personal observation for job creation, 12 full-time and 8 part-time is pretty good during a period of time when we didn't expect it to do anything. So I'm pleased with that. That's 20 people right there that was not working that are now continuing to work during the COVID period. I'm sure with the people that are running the motel now that they will be able to get up to the 18. Hopefully they will. We encourage them to do that, but I think getting to 12 full-time and 8 part-time was just a feat within itself, and I do appreciate that from the company.
Okay. Hearing no other comments, we'll leave it as is and act on it.
Mr. Chairman, I'll just make one more comment for everybody. If everybody could have foreseen the future and what the pandemic has done to all businesses, some of them it's actually helped, But we'd probably all acted and made a little bit different decision than we did. So in a way, when you count the part-timers, as Johnny commented, it kind of levels things off. But as an entity with a contract, we have to ask those questions. What you going to do if? So that's the reason I asked the question.
All right. Thank you. All right, with no other comments or objections, we'll leave this item on our agenda. Item number 2 on the scheduled public hearing agenda is Community Development Amendment Request to Ordinance 2018-16 and public hearing. This will be presented by Peter Mentor. Good afternoon, Pete.
Yes. I'd like to present the item before you today. It's an amendment to Ordinance 2018-16. If you recall, back in December of 18, the board decided a conditional rezoning case. It was for property PIN number 2733063442. This rezoning request was to rezone a piece of property from the low density to the low density conservation district to the PRMU conditional district. Excuse me, from the low density conservation district to the planned residential mixed use conditional district. The conditional district means that in addition to the rezoning, there's another element of the approval which pertained to the conditional request that was also asked at that time. And so in order for the rezoning to take place, the conditional use request was also tied to that, and the request at that time was to construct a 100-foot tall communications tower for a radio station antenna. The board at that time listened to the applicant and the public, and at that time voted to approve the rezoning, conditional rezoning request with conditions. One of those conditions was that the maximum height of the communications tower would be 100 foot tall, which was the request of the applicant at that time, along with several other conditions. The communications tower has not been constructed to this day, but the plan is to move forward with that in the near future. However, the applicant is now wishing to increase the height of the tower from 100 feet to 150 feet. Since the condition was placed on the rezoning and conditional rezoning of 100 feet, the applicant had to make a formal request to this board, who originally approved the request, to consider allowing the tower height to be increased essentially 50% to 150 feet tall. And the remaining conditions would remain in place. So that is the request of the applicant, simply to request the height of the tower to be increased from 100 feet to 150 feet. All other conditions remain the same. This doesn't affect the rezoning of the property, just the condition that it was approved under.
All right, thank you, Pete. Gentlemen, you've heard this information. Any questions for Peter on this matter?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I noticed in the presentation, they also were moving the site to construct it, moving the location, not the site, excuse me. And I am just assuming, I built two of these things, excuse me. I was in charge of the radio station that we built two of these towers, both of them very large. But I'm sure they had an engineer involved in that, and I am also assuming if they could have gone higher, they would, if the engineer said the FCC would allow it.
Right, so the good question, what they'll have to do, if the board approves that height increase, they're going to have to submit a revised site development plan. As you mentioned, they're thinking about moving the location of the tower. As the height increases, the fall zone would also increase. And so there is a structure that would be in close proximity to the tower. I believe they may request it, which wouldn't require approval here, but they may want to move the tower to move that fall zone away, further away from that structure, which would be, the right thing to do in that case. And also, you mentioned earlier the height of the tower. That's something that's regulated by the zoning ordinance, and so the current zoning ordinance doesn't have a tower height maximum. That's basically dictated by the FCC, FAA. If it goes above 200 feet tall, then the tower has to have special markings and lights to allow it to be seen better. But you see towers that are hundreds of feet when they're television towers, and some radio towers hundreds of feet tall. Burke County doesn't have a maximum height. So if somebody proposed a tower which was 500 feet tall, if it could be justified, then there's nothing in the zoning ordinance to deny that approval. Of course, any communications tower would normally go to the Board of Adjustment for approval. So they'd have to justify that height to the board.
The one on Smith Mountain, the tower on Smith Mountain, is
Is that-
500 feet on top of 1,100 and some sea level feet, I think, which gets it about 1,600 feet high.
Right. Yeah, I'm not sure the name of it. We call it, referred to as High Peak over here off the interstate. There's several towers up there.
Flat Gap has a bunch of towers.
Yeah,
like that.
the company's proposing a tall tower there as well, so that would go before the Board of Adjustment. But this case, the rezoning was approved, the tower was approved. They're just basically requesting an increase of the height.
Well, the reason I asked the question is I told Brian earlier, I'm just interested in if they could go higher, if they could move it up on the mountain and solve half of our problems with being able to access internet, then you're looking at a different picture and just be really helpful to Burke County to be able to access internet from a facility like that. So,
Yeah.
because that FM signal's line of sight. Anything gets in front of it, you don't get the signals.
That's true. That's true.
All right.
That's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions, comments on this item? Hearing none, without objection, this item will remain on the agenda. This brings us to item number 3, Community Development Zoning Map Amendment ZMA 2021-01. Again, this will be presented by Pete.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This, again, for the record, is a zoning map amendment 2021-01, request from Patrick and Jacqueline Welsh to rezone their property, which totals 2.29 acres. The request zone the property from the current office institutional zoning district to residential 2 zoning district. Little background on this case. This property was one of over 2,000 parcels that was relinquished by the city of Morganton some years back to county. And each individual parcel was not able to be looked at individually for zoning. It was basically Morganton that assigned the most compatible zoning district from the county to those parcels. And so this area was zoned office institutional because on one side of it was a medical facility and on the other side was a church. And so they zoned that small area office institutional, and that's what was brought forth before the county. And during that mass rezoning, that was approved. Well, that wasn't a problem for the property owners at the time, but recently with the low interest rates, they approached a lending resource to refinance their home and met with difficulty because it was a residential loan, but the property was zoned office institutional, not residential. So the loan was denied. So that's what prompted them to come in to request this rezoning. It's got a single-family home on the property now that they live in. They just had difficulty with that loan. So in rezoning this property to the R2, it will bring it into conformity. Currently, a residential use in office institutional is a non-conforming use. So that rezoning to the R2 district would bring that property and dwelling into conformity, and it would also be the most appropriate zoning since it is being used for a residence. And just for the record, I'd like to read the PIN number for that property. That's PIN number 270-2966-923. And as I mentioned, that property is off of old MC-18, just outside of the current Morganton jurisdiction, to the north and to the west. So the photograph there outlines the subject property, And as you see to the left of that property, that big field, but the driveway leading to the medical facility. And then right next to the dwelling to the right is the church. All other structures around that it's residential. So this would be in conforming with the zoning ordinance. The current land use plan recognizes this area as secondary growth area, and that pertains to both commercial and residential properties. So the rezoning would be compatible with the current land use ordinance as well. The request went before the planning board on March 25th of this year, and after hearing applicant and any lack of public comment, the board voted unanimously 6-0 to approve the rezoning request.
All right, thank you, Pete. Gentlemen, you've heard this information. Any questions for Peter on this matter?
Mr. Chairman, not a question, just a statement. Looking at the map and seeing where the home is located, they do not have room to put a second home on that lot, do they?
2.29 acres would allow for a second dwelling on that property if they chose to.
They'd have to give a road right away plus a lot on the back.
They would have to provide a driveway, yes. If they kept it one parcel, they would, basically have to provide another driveway to that. The property's large enough that it could be subdivided, and then, another dwelling put back there. But during that process, everything's reviewed as far as whether they're on septic or public sewer, and all those things would be taken in consideration.
Yeah, I agree with your synopsis. The only fair thing to do is to rezone it, to bring it in check. Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions?
No question, Pete, but one comment. These folks are practically neighbors of mine. They were fortunate enough to get out of the ETJ. I wasn't. So I hope we can look favorably upon this. It is residential, should have been residential the entire time. So they deserve that classification of residential. Just a comment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments on this matter? All right, here none, this item will remain on the public hearings agenda. Thank you, Pete. Item number 4 on the public hearing agenda is Western Piedmont Council of Governments Grant CDBG Water Project 16I-2914, closeout public hearing number 2. This will be presented by Aaron Schulte or Schulte? Shoddy. Okay. All right, Aaron, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Just to clarify, this is a repeat of the public hearing that we held back in November. We're just redoing it to correct some procedural issues, but I'm just going to kind of go through a summary of the project here. The public hearing was required to close out any CDBG grant, including the water project on Roney Road and Highway 18 South. We got a $2 million grant awarded by the NC Division of Water Infrastructure in 2017. And this project extended 18,870 linear feet of water line on Highway 18 South, connecting dead-end lines on 18 South and the John Avey Street intersection. And it also installed another 12,130 feet of water line on Roney Road to the old NC Highway 18 South intersection. Prior to this project, homes in the area were served on rock wells with low yields, and water was high in iron, manganese, and hydrogen sulfide. Other homes were served by springs with varying water yields contingent on precipitation. Income surveys were conducted for each of the 42 households within the project area, and the total water project benefit was determined to be 64.7% low to moderate individuals. The project provided an additional direct benefit to 23 low to moderate income households that were connected to the water line. And that's 46 low-income persons in those households. In addition to the new water lines installed, the project also installed 29 new hydrants and 40 new meter setters and boxes. The project benefited 85 people and 42 households with access to a new water line. It also benefited 23 households or 46 persons, 100% low to moderate income with the free water tap and housing connection, and installed 31,000 linear feet of 8-inch water lines. There was no budgetary effect from this public hearing. This is just to provide an overview of the project. There were 2 change orders throughout the course of the project, and the net decrease of $17,000 to the construction contract. The grant was $2 million. The total project cost, including administration and everything, was $2,117,943.43. And this was pulled from existing fund balance. So all I ask at this point is that we hold a public hearing to close out this project.
All right, thank you, Aaron. Gentlemen, you've heard this information. Any questions for Aaron on this item?
Just one quick one. I hope you find us another one that'd be grilled soon. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Aaron. This item will remain on the agenda. This brings us to our consent agenda. First item on the consent agenda is opposition to increased access to marijuana through decriminalization and potential legalization. Gentlemen, I hope you've had an opportunity to look at this resolution. As you know, we continue to hear talks of possibility of looking at decriminalizing marijuana, and we've dealt lots with abuse of all kinds of substances in our county. And this resolution just points out that we don't think it's such a good idea. I'd be glad to try to answer any questions or any thoughts, or hear any thoughts from anybody on this item. All right, hearing none, this item will remain on the consent agenda without objection. Item number 2, Public Health Month proclamation. I'll also bring this item. Again, I hope you've had an opportunity to look at this resolution. It simply recognizes our public health department and all the work that they do and the programs that they're involved in. Again, I won't read this for you, but any questions, comments on this item? Hearing none, without objection, this item will remain on the consent agenda. Item number 3, Clerk, appointment to Library Board of Trustees. This item will be presented by Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This is a request to remove Sherry Willard's name from the official roster for the Library Board of Trustees and thank her for her service to the community, and to appoint Susan Burley to the Library Board of Trustees, seat number 9, at large, for the remainder of a 3-year term ending December 31st, 2023.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Any questions, comments on this item? Hearing none, this item will remain on the consent agenda. Item number 4 comes from the County Manager, proclamation declaring May the 6th, 2021 as National Day of Prayer. Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As far back as I can remember, we've always done this, and it's just, I think, a good thing for us to do if the board is willing.
All right, thank you, Brian. Any questions, comments on this matter?
Mr. Chairman, I really thank you for that. And that we support it is just doubly sweet. And I also want to take this opportunity to thank you for the item number 1 and 2 about the marijuana. We need to do what we can to protect our citizens, and both of this does part of that.
All right. Thank you, Madam. Without objection, this item will remain on the consent agenda. Item number 5, Tax Department, Tax Collection Report for March 2021. This will be presented by our Tax Administrator, Danny Eisenhower. Danny, good to see you.
Good to see you, gentlemen. Tax collection report, property tax, we have collected 100.45% of budget. Motor vehicles, 87.89%. Current year taxes combined, those combined is 99.26%. Delinquent taxes were at 99.55%, and late list penalties were at 134.55% of budget. Property tax compared to the levy, we have collected 97.53%.
All right, thank you, Danny. Good report. Any questions for Danny on this item? Hearing none, this item will remain on the consent agenda. This brings us to item number 6 on the consent agenda, Tax Department Release Refund Report for March 2021. Again, this will be presented by Danny.
Yes, sir. Releases, we have, the report shows $3,590.40. We rebilled $890.21, which gives us a net release of $2,700.19. There was no refunds on the tax system. Vehicle tax, there was $101.54 refunded.
All right, thank you, Danny. Gentlemen, you've heard this information, and it should be there in front of you as well. Any questions for Danny on this item? Hearing none, this item will remain on the consent agenda. Thank you, Danny. This brings us to item number 6, items for decision. We have one item to consider today, Community Development Lake James Glamping LLC lease agreement. This will be presented by our Deputy County Manager, Planning Director Scott Carpenter. Afternoon, Scott.
Good afternoon, Mr. Jeff. How are you, gentlemen?
Good, hope you are.
I'm doing well, thank you. Well, this is the item that never keeps from coming up. We've been talking about doing something out there at the lake for 5 years now. It started off to where it was going to be tree houses, and we investigated should the county try to do such things. Then we talked to various individuals about public-private partnerships. Then that wound up leading us into the wedding venue and the venture there. And after that didn't move forward, we came back and we decided, well, we still think there should be some sort of tree houses or things, because tourism is definitely increasing out at the lake and in our north area, and there just aren't enough places for people to stay. So this item is, I've been working with our county attorney and with Mr. Isaac Hoff, I guess for about 6 months, to come up with this lease agreement. It's very complex when you're trying to negotiate a public-private partnership, and you have a very valuable piece of county land, and then you have expectations and things. But I think that the agreement that we drafted up is actually a very interesting one and a good one. And so let me make this presentation, and I'll answer any questions you may have. So Burke County wishes to enter into a public-private development and lease agreement at the Fonta Flora County Park in order to develop tree houses, cabins, and glamping structures on plus or minus 15 acres. The development agreement will be for a term of 25 years with provisions that will allow for a 40-year lease if the developer is in compliance with the terms of the agreement. The agreement will require building no fewer than 15 rental units and no more than 30 structures over the life of the agreement. Burke County has been in discussion with Lake James Glamping LLC, who has an interest in leasing the property from Burke County and developing glamping tree houses and cabins to rent to the public. The following document, which I hope that you all have and have read, Hoff Development Agreement, is the result of our negotiations and shall serve as the basis for any other potential bids. As far as the budgetary effect, it would be positive. The lease will consist of a base $5,000 annual rent paid in monthly installments and 3% of the gross rental sales once the third structure is built. The lease will increase by $1,000 a year for each additional structure in the following years. The lessee shall be responsible for paying taxes on any real property and for paying occupancy taxes as well. So due to this development agreement, including a long-term lease, the development agreement had to be treated differently than some of the other things that we normally do because it needed to be in compliance with CGS 16269, and this requires special provisions for advertising and potential upset bids from other parties. Other bids must be submitted within 10 days of to the Burke County Attorney, Mr. J.R. Simpson. And I'm happy to try to answer any questions you may have.
All right, thank you, Scott. Gentlemen, hope you've had a chance to look at this agreement. Any questions to Scott on this matter?
I like this presentation. This is good.
Thank you, sir.
It's much better than the other project. This is really good.
Good. Glad
So the 30 units, after, if they're filled and they're being utilized, he's got an option to build more, from what I read?
He does not on this property.
Not on this
Unless
property.
there's a future negotiation on another part of the land. However, since there is limited land that's usable at the county park, I think we would want to entertain other types of activities to bring tourism in besides just cabins and rentals. Now, what this doesn't, I think, allow, this is for cabins and yurts and things like that. There's still allowance for primitive camping and RV camping and things like that if we ever wanted to entertain a traditional campground.
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple. Scott, one of the things we need to maybe take at least a look at, I'm like Wayne, I like that concept, but in the last couple of years, during the agricultural statewide committee meetings, coming up again and again, and it has created many counties to not accept wind towers and solar farms because they say it's expensive to remove them, and people just usually sell or move off, and the counties are responsible for the cleanup, so to speak. So I don't know, JR, if we need to address that with this or not. And the other question is, if he's there for 25 or 40 years, does he restore it back to the original condition, or is that an open end for him?
Well, I think that we have put into the agreement that as we move past the 25 years, there's opportunities for renegotiation of the structures and how they will move forward and how they would be rented. And so as it moves along, we would be addressing those things and their condition, and if the county would wind up buying it out and taking over it at the end.
Well, as long as it works and it makes his money, there's no reason to maybe question that, but I at least wanted to bring it to the attention. And then the final thing I had, how big is a tree farm? Is it literally built up into trees?
Well, the trees that are at the land that we were given by Crescent are not substantially large enough to hold the weight of tree houses, you know, the traditional tree houses. And so they would be supported by stilts and may have a tree incorporated into the structure itself. So a tree may come out of the deck or something.
So it's an elevated
Platform.
camping situation where you don't have to worry about the copperheads and the rabbits.
Yes, sir. That's right.
That's all I have.
Other questions, comments?
So if this is really successful, there is or isn't a place for him to add more units?
There is not on this 15 acres, but there is.
But on that piece of property, I mean, that big piece of property.
That could be a possibility, but also for traditional camping, we have 180 acres from Duke Energy that we could work with Duke Energy to provide a traditional camping experience for RVs and other. But we have a clause in here that protects this development from other competition. So
I'm just thinking if it's really successful and we need more space or for more units, which could easily happen, I think, once we get this established, that, you know, I'd hate to see that he doesn't have room to expand or whatever.
I think we'll have to look at it in the future, sir. There's nothing
But
proposed.
that's hard for somebody that's planning something to not know now as he's building that I can expand, I don't have room to expand or whatever if I'm successful. I mean, it looks to me like we're sort of penalizing somebody for being successful. If that's the case and we don't know that.
I don't think we are yet, but I think we're very flexible. This board always has been very flexible with things, and I guess we just have to look at a proposal that would come in the future.
But I just hate to say no at this time, and this is all you can do and whatever, and it's just so successful that he needs more space.
Yes.
And I think it will be successful.
We're praying that it will be.
Other questions, comments?
Kind of, this is not exactly referring to that. When is that boat access going to be moved?
So this year, we're supposed to have new engineering and design for the deep water access. That is where, at the end of County Park, down Eagles Nest Way. And so the construction of that, they're trying to move it up because North Carolina Wildlife and actually the county has been trying to encourage it to be moved up. And they're looking at 2022 for possible construction of the deep water access. After 2022, they'll start the engineering and design for the Linville access area where people currently launch, and that should be redone into the canoe kayak, hopefully by 2024. So we're encouraging Duke to help us here with this because our tourism is exploding, and a lot of people's are, and it's causing issues on the roads. People parking those boats up and down the roads is an issue.
Mr. Chairman, I have another question, Scott. Do you anticipate major objections to cutting trees and doing this in that area?
So I saw that coming, and so I have a meeting with Lake James Environmental and with Mr. Isaac Hoff, should this be approved, and we will be bringing them into the discussion of design and setbacks and other things during the site plan review and as we create the master plan for that. So this will be a high-quality, low-impact, rustic village look. So minimal tree cutting is one of the objectives.
So the answer is you hope not, or you don't see it?
I hope not.
Okay. That's all.
Other question, comment? All right, hearing none, this item will remain on the decision agenda.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I do apologize. That item needs to be moved to May
Yes.
4th to comply with the 30-day notice requirements.
Yes,
That's
I
right.
meant to see that. Thank you for keeping me in order. That, gentlemen, that item will need to move to May 4th. That will be our normally scheduled pre-agenda meeting, so we will take that. And that is viewed to the 30-day notice requirement and the date of this meeting, and not working out quite.
Mr. Chairman, could I just ask Scott one question?
Yeah.
Scott,
Yes, sir?
what is the building down from the brewery at the crossroads there that's got all the rocks around it? And it used to be, you know,
That's owned by Steve and Polly Ledbetter, and it's going to be an office and also a place for bicycles to stop and to replenish, and it'll have a bike repair station there as they're going around the lake.
I just wanted all that rock there and all that, what it's gonna be, you know.
It's just landscaping.
Yeah,
and-
right. Good, thank you.
And they're also, if I may, have purchased all the properties around there, and they're going to be doing some market type of rustic markets with vegetables and various things like that for people to come and go to. And they're also looking at the potential for gas and things at one of the other places. So they're trying to make it a little
Right.
destination out there.
Where is this located, Scott?
This is over where 126 curves down toward the brewery, and it's at South Mountains Institute Road, I believe. It's where those intersect. It's right there.
Yeah, I remember seeing that
It
activity.
needs some investment and some work, but they've been doing a lot of work and putting a lot of money into
There's
it.
a lot of rock there. I'll tell you.
There
I'll tell you,
is,
They got a
there
lot of
is.
rock.
All right, thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
So this item will be on the May 4th at 4 o'clock for a recessed meeting. All right, item number 7, reports. Gentlemen, remind you to spay and neuter your pets and don't litter. And my litter just continues to kind of plague us. I can't say anything more about litter than I think we've said, but just encourage you and your neighbors and everybody else to pick up. And I think, maybe enforcement is something we need to keep considering and how to go about it. But I did complete my 2 clock hours of ethics training as required, and I would remind you to submit your reports for inclusion in the agenda package. If you haven't done that, please do so between now and the next short while, so our clerk can get those in the agenda package. Other items for discussion, item number 8 comes from me as well today, statutes concerning monuments. Gentlemen, you all know that we've had the last 2 or 3 of our meetings, we've had comments concerning the monument and the statue on the old historic courthouse square. We had discussions on this matter some time back, and I've asked JR again to rehearse for us and remind us what our particular specifics are regarding the statue on our courthouse square, and also the general statutes as outlined in the state of North Carolina relating to monuments and their potential movement. So, JR, I'm going to ask you at this time, I think you've provided us some information. It should be in front of you, some things to look at. So, JR, if you could kind of go through that process with us.
Sure. In dealing with monuments on public property, the legislature back in 2015 passed a law that's now codified as North Carolina General Statute Section 100-2.1. 2.1A deals with state-owned monuments or monuments on state-owned property, and Section B deals with monuments that are on the land owned by counties and cities. And there is a definition involved of what is called an object of remembrance. And an object of remembrance is a monument, memorial, plaque, similar object that commemorates an event, a person, or military service that is part of North Carolina's history. If an object falls into that definition, and I think our Confederate monument does constitute an object of remembrance, then what the county can do is extremely restricted under this statute. It can be relocated to a different place, only under two conditions: when such is necessary for the observance, for the preservation of the object, and when it's necessary for construction, renovation, or reconfiguring of the property around it. There doesn't seem to be that situation present for the purposes of the statute here. Some people take the position that if there are mobs, if the object of remembrance is being splattered with paint or being damaged in some form, that constitutes a reason to take it down. That could constitute a short-term reason, but it doesn't constitute a reason unless it's necessary for the preservation of the object. Now, if an object of remembrance is moved, it can't be permanently relocated except to a site of similar prominence, honor, visibility, availability, and access within the jurisdiction that it was located. It cannot be relocated to a museum. It can't be relocated to a cemetery or mausoleum unless it was originally at such a location. So if it was originally in a cemetery, it could be relocated to another cemetery. But when you look at Burke County's places of prominence, I don't know that you could find one that is as prominent as the old Burke County Courthouse, unless it could possibly be the new Burke County Courthouse, because that's also a place of prominence where Burke Countyans come to conduct their business. There are three exceptions to the application of the statute, and one is for highway markers, which of course wouldn't apply to us. The other refers to objects of remembrance that are owned by a private party that's located on a public property and is the subject of a legal agreement between the private party and the public subdivision governing the removal or relocation of the object. So that creates two questions. One, who is the owner of the monument? And two, is there a legal agreement with the owner of the monument that governs what can happen to it? The county appears to be the owner of the monument, and I say that because there are no county records that we've been able to find that are in legible form that address the placing of the Confederate monument on the grounds of the old Burke County Courthouse in the early 1910s, or the placing of a statue atop the monument in 1918. Secondary sources would seem to indicate that the county may have paid a substantial part of the cost of the monument, the original monument, and that the statue on top was a gift from an individual who was formerly a Burke County resident and fought in the Civil War. There also seems to be no legal agreement in existence between the county and any group that sets forth any ownership claims or terms that would create ownership rights in the private group. So we're looking at a situation where neither one of the two elements necessary for the object of remembrance to be accepted from this statute are available. Now, since we're dealing with history, there's always a chance that something could show up later, but that's, if it has, I haven't seen it. Then there is the third exception, and that is an object of remembrance for which a building inspector or similar official has determined poses a threat to public safety because of an unsafe or hazardous condition. Now, that refers to a dangerous condition or state of repair to the monument that might cause it to fall or to cause someone to be hurt, and not the presence of protesters or counter-protesters or fighting over the monument itself. And there are entities that have attempted to shoehorn that into the unsafe or hazardous condition, but the reference to a building inspector or similar official convinces me that the reason for that is that the public monument is deteriorating and could cause someone to get hurt accidentally. It's my opinion that none of these exceptions are applicable to the Confederate monument at the old Burke County Courthouse. I think we have to assume ownership because we paid money for it, and it's set on our property for more than 100 years, and there's no legal agreement in existence that would say otherwise. Now, should one turn up, that would cause me to change my opinion, but depending on what the old agreement said, but to this point we don't have one. We also have a control issue because of the lease that the county entered into that leased the old courthouse square to the city for a 25-year term that could be extended to 40 years. And the terms of the lease require the city to maintain the Confederate monument and the Sam Urban statue. It says that it will be properly maintained in a good state of repair by the city. It also gives the city to the ability to put other artwork out on the courthouse square. And it also says that the city has to keep the Confederate monument and the Sam Urban statue insured to their full insurable value. Because it addresses those monuments, it's my opinion that the city itself would not have the ability to remove them without the county's consent, and that the county would not be able to remove it without the city's consent. So, in short, we're in a situation where the county has authority, the county's authority to relocate the Confederate statue is strictly limited by the action of the legislature with Section 100-2.1. And no exception to the statute appears to be applicable in the current situation, so there does not appear to be a way under current law to remove the Confederate monument should that be the desire of this board. I have also looked at how other counties and cities have dealt with this situation, and one thing I have discovered is that for every Confederate monument there is a different set of circumstances and different rules. In Iredell County, it appears that the Confederate monument had always been under private ownership. Iredell also possessed a memorandum recorded in the 1920s that their board considered a legal agreement, so that they came under the exception C2 of the statute. So that would allow them to move their statute, but we don't have those circumstances here. And by the way, I understand that Iredell's situation has fallen apart because the city of Statesville won't accept the monument in the cemetery. In Gaston County, there was evidence that the county had paid money for their monument back in the 1910s. So they are now, they haven't removed their monument, and they are now involved in a suit with the NAACP, among other plaintiffs, it's my understanding that one of the things that the suit is asking to do is to have section 100-2.1 declared unconstitutional. Discuss matters, and that may be a good thing. Alamance County has actually had a suit filed against it by the same or similar groups of plaintiffs, which means that it's more and more likely that perhaps our state Supreme Court will end up ruling on section 100-2.1. And so we might have an application that every one of the counties can rely on and not have to do their own interpreting. I talked to the Salisbury city attorney, and the city council had granted the United Daughters of the Confederacy a right to place its monument in a public right-of-way, and a board resolution from 1908 provided them a basis for an agreement with the UDC for moving the monument to other city-owned property. And that's what's been done in that situation. So we have heard in hearing from the public that other entities have done something, and it's a situation where every monument is different, every backstory is different, but I haven't found anything in Burke counties that would allow us to go outside the statute 100-2.1.
All right, thank you, JR. Gentlemen, you've heard this information. Any questions from JR?
JR, so just for clarity's sake, because we're all getting a lot of calls on this, and, I'm always open and willing to discuss whatever, but, and look at options, but you're saying that's just not allowable right now, period, until we get legal precedent set. So when people are saying, well, can you not move it to Forest Hill Cemetery or the History Museum, you're saying that's not deemed allowable under the law because it's not.
It's not a private monument and a pre-existing agreement.
Okay.
Yeah, I do understand that the city council meeting last night did authorize a letter to the county commissioners offering property in one of the cemeteries, and but again, you've got the problem. You can't move it there because it's not of the same dignity as where it is now.
I take it our partners at the city did not realize this law was in place.
They do. I watched their meeting last night, and the city attorney read this statute to them.
Okay.
But it didn't slow down their enthusiasm any at all, as best I could tell.
But you're deeming it as well that if we did receive legal precedent in some case, and we decided, hey, we're willing to look at options about moving it, we would have to work with the city of Morganton, in your estimation, to come to an agreement to do so.
Right, because of our pre-existing lease with the city.
Because that's what's, finding out a lot of good information here today. I just, it's kind of frustrating somewhat because we've pretty much given the city carte blanche when it comes to that courthouse, and actually probably expanded upon their scope of work beyond what we actually anticipated. And some of it looks good, I'm not knocking that, but I just found it curious that, we're not responsible for anything but a certain square footage where that statue happens to be standing. And so I just found that pretty interesting.
Other questions, comments for JR?
Mr. Chairman, I've written several items on this. Got it printed at one paper, sent 2 items to News Herald, and they refused to print either one of them. And I don't know, I mentioned to a lady today, what kind of person would ask you to break an oath that you swore on the Bible? That you would uphold the Constitution, federal law, state law, county law. So what kind of person would ask you to break that? And it gives me great concern that some people think that, that they can create, I'm going to call it a movement for not a choice of words, but we as county commissioners can honor movements, and especially movements that might break the law. And you can't honor popular opinion if it breaks the law. And you can bend it, you can change it, you can hide it, you can hate it, you can despise it, you can even swear to yourself it never happened. And it did happen, but you will never, 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 never change the truth. And just because you don't want to accept it. Now that monument out there, I've never seen it swipe at a fly, flea, nothing. And I'm here to tell you, what's going on in people's mind is between their head. It is not because there's a monument out there. We just celebrated Easter. There was a hate movement that crucified Jesus. And the 2 kings and other people involved in that whole ordeal did not have the fortitude or the courage to uphold the truth and to do the right thing. And I am proud that this is on here and that, that we can solidify that the law is the law, but not only that. I mentioned at a meeting the other day that I punched up on the internet, Googled, how many times does the Bible say or use the form of the word remembrance? And I didn't bring that with me, but I know it was 8,000, I believe, 467. And we can't expect this generation, the past generation, or the future generations to remember if we take it away. And I don't think, it ain't think, but I am of the opinion that God would not be pleased. They still celebrate, out of remembrance and out of God's instructions, the Jewish people still celebrate 4 feasts a year. And we really don't have a choice in this as far as, and I agree with JR, the law is pretty clear on it. It was put there by past generations for remembrance purposes. And it says we should not remember. I could say a whole lot more, but I think that says it in a nutshell.
All right, any other questions, comments? All right, gentlemen, well, what I would like to, I guess, be sure I understand at this point, we've heard the information from our attorneys, we've had our own chance to look at, this is something that's not new to us necessarily, because we had a report on this earlier, I forget the dates, maybe in 2017 or somewhere along in there. But obviously, lots of folks don't realize it, don't know it, or if they do, they don't care, or they hear, as JR has already mentioned, well, they done it over here, why can't we do it? Well, and this is why I asked JR to rehearse this again, because every situation has its own set of specifics, and ours has the specifics that JR has lined out for us. And I think he's correct. My interpretation of what the law says and the specifics of our monument, I think, we cannot mess with it. So with that being said, unless there's some other direction this board wishes to take, it will be my statement going forward that we believe, based on legal opinion, that we cannot move the monument, and we will take no further action at this time. So.
Mr. Chairman, I want to concur with your assessment of what has happened. I watched the same episode last night at the city council meeting, and the letter that we should be receiving was said that we should start some kind of dialogue between opponents and proponents. I think we've already done that. I think we listened in a number of meetings to people that come in that were for the monument, some that were against the monument, and I think our door has always been open. I went back and I followed every county through the association. We've been privileged to know every county that's been either sued and or has had discussions about their monuments in their local counties. And I think the Alamance County one was the one that I paid closer attention to. Unfortunately, the county manager there neglected to obtain information about the legality of his opinions that he offered up to his board. He offered some bad opinions and asked them to take the monuments down before their county attorney, Clyde Albright, came back and said, whoa, wait a minute, and advised the commissioner that pursuant to state law that JR has so eloquently given to us today, the law is specific. There's no ifs, there's no ands to me as I read it. It doesn't need any interpretation. I don't intend to interpretate it. I can see what it says. There are exceptions, 1 and 2 there, that if it could be moved, but it cannot. So the law is the law. As far as I'm concerned, the law is the law. And that when you have an attorney that sat there last night and read the law and said that some of these things are very specific, that they're going to send a letter to us to tell us that we need to do certain things. We've already done that. And I'm somewhat offended. Maybe this is not the right place to do this, but I think we've done everything that people could expect us to do. They have their opinions. Some are on one side and some are on another. That's just the way it is. That's the way human beings are. But I prescribe by what Maynard said. We took an oath to uphold the law until that law changes. If it changes, it is very specific in what it says to do. And I appreciate the way you're moving forward with this, that we abide by the law there is a lawsuit against Alamance County, and as J.R. said, maybe it'll go to some court and somebody will make a decision, that says different than what it is right now. But up until then, I think it's my personal opinion. I don't know what I don't even want to call it an opinion. I read the law as it is, and it's very specific, and that's what I hope that we can follow. That's what I want to follow. If I had my rathers, I'd rather we put up some kind of plaque over there that says, "We, the citizens of Burke County, choose to remember our past and to take seriously the lessons we have learned. And rather than be offended, we choose to take a moment to offer forgiveness and to receive forgiveness and to pledge to work together for a more promising future." That's what I think we need to be. I'll close with that, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. Other comments? So with that, gentlemen, I will again just state, publicly that we've been very glad to hear opinions on every side of this matter. I think this board as a whole appreciates the opinion of every person who has come before us, who's made public statements, regardless of what their opinion or position is. But going forward, unless you guys give me some other direction, my response will be that this board will not be taking action on this item based on the fact that we believe we have no legal basis to do so. So with that, thank you for this time of discussion. And we have one other item that we need to bring in here, and I'm going to ask Bradley Kirkley, our zoning administrator, to come to the podium for just a moment. Gentlemen, you received this today. Maybe Bradley can give us a synopsis on this item. It's an appeal of condemnation order from Lee Flynn, and we haven't had a chance to look at this. So Bradley, if you don't mind, tell us what we've got here, okay?
Certainly. Thank you for the opportunity to get this before you on short notice. Much like yourself, I wasn't notified by the clerk until very last moment, so I'll try to summarize as best I can to kind of give you a rundown. The property is located off of Ridge Creek Drive. Landowner is a Lee Flynn. I'm not sure of the detailed information you have in front. I assume it's the memo and packet that I provided to the clerk and to the county attorney earlier this morning. So in short, this is an ongoing situation with a property that caught fire better part of 4 years ago. Home caught fire. Work was looking to be done to restore the home. That never really came to fruition. And then we had the situation through COVID. And at the time of COVID, there was exemptions which allowed for what permits a person may have to not become exempt. So in this situation, Mr. Flynn was allowed an extra year, basically where no work occurred of any kind. I urge each of you in this situation, if this is put on, which it will be an item for you to ultimately offer a decision on because an appeal was filed. Within the past 20 days, the property was finally posted as unsafe. It was done so by the chief building official, Steve Holden. At that time, a condemnation hearing was set, which was conducted of Tuesday of last week within the building inspection's office. Within that, the specific order was handed out as included within your packet, which gave a May 30th deadline for either proper repairs with an engineered letter or the demolition there of the home. It's worth noting, as you can see within the photo of the actual house site, what you cannot see is the backside. The backside of the property owner took a bobcat and drove through the back of it. So the home is basically collapsing on itself. By general statute, once the hearing was held, Mr. Flynn had the option to file an appeal within 10 days. He did so. That is included in front there. Short, simple, 2 sentences, not a whole lot of elaboration on what the purpose for the appeal was. As I referenced to the clerk earlier, that could be for an extenuation of time. General statute only allows for the chief building official to offer 60 days as a maximum for one of those two options to be taken place. If an appeal is filed, it then comes before you five gentlemen to offer a decision on either to, one, uphold the order as it's written. You can approve it and modify it with a change in the amount of time, or you can revoke the order and basically state that the home is free to stay as it currently is. With that kind of gives you a rundown of where things currently stand for the property in question. So at this particular point, from a staff perspective, we are kind of on hold until a decision is offered from the commissioners. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have about the situation of the site. I can turn and tell you up front that I would be prepared for a large turnout of public individuals for this. There are numerous individuals that live up and down Ridge Creek Road. If you're not familiar with where Ridge Creek Road is, it's actually located behind Hopewell Baptist Church. Within there, I would estimate to say 30 plus homes, I guess, go up and down Ridge Creek Drive. They've looked at this situation that you see in that photo for the better part of 4 years. And from a staff perspective, it's time for us to do something about it. That's really all I'll elaborate on beyond that.
All right, thank you, Bradley. So, and JR, keep me in line here. So if we, basically he's appealed, that appeal is to us. Is
That's
that
correct. That's correct.
So do we have a timetable to listen to that appeal or to rule on that appeal?
By statute, it's to be done in a timely manner is really all the statute says. It doesn't say you have a month to turn and hear it. It just basically means once it's appealed, it is put on hold until at just time when the board can offer it for consideration.
Okay, so if we put it on our agenda for our April meeting at this time, is there any particular notice we have to give to do that, or can we go ahead and proceed with that, putting it on the April agenda for hearing?
Correct. So at whatever meeting date that it is placed there too, by statute requirement, we would notify Mr. Flynn by first-class mail. We would also post the meeting date at the property site. I have had numerous calls from several citizens in the area who are already inquiring on when the public meeting will take place. So I would justify and notify them. I'm sure public notice is placed on the county website of that for the meeting, the agenda, so on and so forth.
So will this be a public hearing, or will it just simply be a decision for the appeal?
It would basically be, ultimately you'd be granting a interpretation and a decision based from the order. However, I would simply say at that meeting during the public registration time for public comment, that is when you will be bombarded with those citizens at that point in time.
So it's not a public hearing, it will.
That is correct.
They can certainly make public comment, I
That's right.
understand that, but so
That's
it's, this is not a public hearing, it'll just be a matter of us hearing the information from staff and ruling on the appeal.
That's right.
And so if we concur with the ruling of staff, then what happens next?
So, as mentioned, you have one of three options based from the statute to turn and do. Based from that, at that point in time, so let's give the example that you uphold the order of Steve Holden, that the structure does need to come down. You have the option to uphold the same May 30th deadline. You could modify that and say, we're granting you 60 days from our meeting. You could go less than that. You could go more than that. Years ago, we had one of these same situations for a condemnation in the town of Glen Alpine. They gave the guy a year. So I don't know if that ever got cleaned up, by the way.
As I recall, we've been down this trail already quite some time, so.
Yes.
I won't say any more than that right now, but, okay, I think with that, gentlemen, unless I hear otherwise, we'll put this item on the April agenda and hear the, yes, sir.
Bradley, is this the same property that the lady had to leave because of motorcycle races and all that kind of stuff and noise and intimidation by her neighbors? Is
Not that I'm aware of, sir. This situation in property stems, it's ongoing emails which continue to, and I do urge you that if you've never driven by there, to take a drive-by. The photo that is included there doesn't necessarily do it justice. And I will turn and tell you, the backyard looks worse than the front yard. It is in some ways as if a small tornado touched down on one piece of property, tore everything up, and then just got up and left. And so there's a fence that's been installed. The fence has graffiti items, which neighbors directly across the road read every day. If you turn to the opposite side, there's a tarp with graffiti written on it, which blocks that from another neighbor who would read that every day when he goes out to get the mail.
But this appears to be a huge house, is that correct?
Square footage wise, I don't really know. I could probably look that up by tax records. The structure did catch fire. You can actually notice in the center, right there by the chimney, the home actually burnt in two separated areas. So that open gap that you actually turn and see has been exposed for 4 years. So you've got water, rain, everything else that just went to this, what would have been the former center of the home. The addition you see on the far, should be on the far left side, that is part of what he did seek to turn and build to add on to. However, as you can see, none of that is enclosed either and has been exposed to the elements for 4 years also.
How long has it been since it's been occupied?
That structure, I would say since the time it was burnt, which 4+ years ago. 4 years. 4 years. He currently resides in the Newton area, I do believe.
All right, got everything you need, Madam Clerk? Thank you, Bradley.
Welcome.
All right, this brings us to item 9, closed session. We do need to have a closed session today to discuss threat and opinion litigation, to preserve the attorney-client privilege, to discuss economic development matters, and to discuss personnel matters. NCGS 143-318.11A 3, 4, 5, and 6. I'll entertain a motion to go into closed session at this time.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Wayne. All those in favor say aye. Aye. And we do have another meeting, Scott and I, so I'm going to ask that we just move right on into closed session if we can and carry on with our business. Okay. Entertain a motion at this time to come out of closed session. So moved. All in favor say aye. We had a proper motion to come out of closed session and that no action was taken in closed session. And with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. No. You're outweighed. That'd be 4-1, Madam Clerk.